All right, so we got like 7 more minutes to finish the quiz. All right, so Andrew is supposed to present today. Brett will present tomorrow, and I have Amber a week from today. I don't see Andrew here at all. Mm. All right, well, if Andrew's not here, I'm gonna try to eat my lunch really fast, so ignore me. Okay. I think if you are still having or you're still taking the quiz, it probably has kicked you out by now. So today we are looking at and talking about Orinoco, the Royal Slave by Aphra Behn. If anyone has Andrew's number, shoot him a message and remind him he's presenting today. And if not, that's fine. If he can't make it, that's fine. I have plenty. Let me show you a bit about what's coming. So there's not much of the semester left. There is about 2 weeks. So we have this week, we're doing Orinoco, and next week. So Brett will present Friday. Next week, Amber, you're presenting Tuesday. That's American Women Poets. And then Friday is Mary Rowlandson, and Victoria will be presenting that day. Okay. I have to do your final analytic response as well as your second last analytic response. I'm sorry, I've been so bad about getting your stuff back to you. Sure, Karam. 5/11 is the final day. I'm not meeting that day. Instead, you get that time to work on your final paper. Choose at least 2 and no more than 4 primary texts that we have read this semester and write about them. Make sure you have something new and insightful to say if you choose a text you've already written about. Make sure to kind of pay attention to the language as well as themes, and compare and contrast the texts. What seems similar, what is different? Are they mostly similar or mostly different? If they're mostly similar, what's one important difference? If they're mostly different, what's one important similarity? Okay. Are the texts saying the same thing about difference in the Renaissance? Otherness? How might one text have influenced another? How might one be speaking back to, criticizing, or revising another? This is going to be 48 pages, type double-spaced MLA format. Here's how you'll be graded. Any questions about your final paper? Maddie, go ahead.
Yeah, this might be kind of an obsolete question because I don't know if I'm going to go this road, but can we compare a text we've read with like in class with one we've read outside of class that is also like Renaissance era, but like we haven't read it in class?
Which one are you thinking?
I was thinking honestly, so because I like from what I've seen so far in Orinoco, it seems kind of influenced by Hamlet. I was thinking maybe like looking at comparisons. Obviously, I'd have to finish the book first.
Yeah, but yeah, if you want to, that sounds okay to me. Okay. Generally, I'd like to see you kind of stay within the stuff we've discussed in class. But since we did do a lot of Shakespeare in this class, I can be persuaded.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Other stuff? Okay. I can't believe there's 2 weeks left of the semester, 2.5, but it's still functionally 2 weeks. Let's talk about Orinoco, which is a crazy, awesome, interesting story. Okay. All right, first half. So this is the first half of the story. Anyone have any trouble kind of getting to it, opening it? Okay. What do you know about Aphra Behn, especially given the kind of introduction that I had you guys read?
Okay, did I read this correctly, or did she actually work as a spy?
Yes, like, she was a spy.
That's badass.
Yeah, she was kind of a badass. So she was a spy for Charles II. after the restoration of a monarchy, for sure. So she was a spy. She was not an aristocrat, which makes her different from a lot of women who were published during that time. She was also the first professional woman writer, that is the first English woman to get paid for writing. So, you know, she was the first professional author. For a long time, she was lost to history. And part of this is because she really horrified the Victorians and people who came after her, because there was so much, frankly, sexual and playful stuff in her writing and in her plays. Like, for example, her poem, The Disappointment, is a poem about premature ejaculation, written from a woman's point of view. Yeah. And part of like kind of what she was interested in was like kind of rebelling against the like puritanical kind of, you know, the Puritans who were running things during the whole interregnum. She's like rebelling against that with kind of like ridiculous and frank sexual stuff. If you're interested, The Disappointment is available online. You can look at it. It's written in very high style, in part to kind of make fun of like men's egos. They write about love in very high style. Yeah. All right. So she was a professional woman writer, but for a long time she was lost to history because she liked dirty stuff. We don't really know much about her life. Part of that was because given her spying for Charles, she might have tried to obscure the early part of her life. We know she was probably not noble. But she was seriously in support of Charles II, so she was a staunch royalist. And she has really interesting ideas about royalty and innate royalty or inborn royalty, as we can start to see in Orinoco. She believed that the ideal society was one of mostly equality and sexual liberation. She didn't really believe in monogamy. She did travel to Suriname when she was young, had a romantic relationship there with the son of a regicide or a king killer. So, you know, you can kind of see like, yeah, she, you know, she was a spy, she was into politics, but like that was kind of secondary to her kind of like sexual experimentation and exploration. Yeah. Okay, some more stuff about her life. After she got back from Suriname, she was an English spy in the Dutch court. She practiced seduction to get to some of her secrets. She really was kind of a badass and a very fascinating kind of figure. She wasn't really supported or rewarded by England for her work as a spy, and that is why she turned to writing. Even during her own life, she often had to defend herself against charges of bawdiness. Do you guys know what bawdiness is? Anyone? Anyone want to take a guess?
I don't know, like sexual exploit. Yeah.
Yeah. So the dictionary defines it as like indecent or lewd or obscene, basically like making dirty jokes all the time. And so like even if men were able to do that, women weren't able to do that, and especially not at men's expense. And so this is why, you know, The Disappointment, she had to kind of defend herself, you know, because it's sort of making fun of like a man and his like inability to perform sexually, and men were not cool with that. So during this time, she wrote almost 20 plays. And she had a pretty liberated sex life, multiple partners throughout her life. She fell initially for that guy in Suriname. She had a possibly fictional husband. He might have been made up. We're not really sure, because married women had a lot more freedom during that time. Potentially a Dutch sailor. There's the guy she seduced in Holland for, you know, state secrets. Late in life, she got with a bisexual lawyer, like a lawyer who like identified as bisexual. And also like late in life, when the theaters were starting to go bankrupt, she turned to translation, but also to prose fiction. And that's kind of where Orinoco is coming from. It's coming from her later career. Okay. So in case you didn't know, Suriname is part of South America. So she did go to the New World when she was young. Okay, here's Venezuela, here's Brazil, French Guiana, and right here in the middle is Suriname. So, and here's like the West Indies, Barbados, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, yeah, Saint Lucia, all those good stuff. Okay, so she's writing about, in a lot of ways, the New World. What else? So yeah. So Orinoco is the story of an African prince. And let's look at the beginning of this thing, because I feel like so this is the one I kind of gave you. So we can look at this one, but it's almost easier to kind of, the words are small there, so it's almost easier to kind of look at this. So this is the intro. This is a very pared down intro, but at least you get some stuff there. All right, this is how Orinoco opens. She says, I do not pretend, in giving you the history of this royal slave, to entertain my reader with adventures of a feigned hero, whose life and fortunes fancy may manage at the poet's pleasure. Nor in relating the truth deign to adorn it with any accidents, but such as arrived in earnest to him. And it shall come simply into the world, recommended by its own proper merits and natural intrigues, there being enough of reality to support it and to render it diverting without the addition of invention. I was myself an eyewitness to a great part of what you will find here set down, and what I could not be witness of, I received from the mouth of the chief actor in this history, the hero himself, who gave us the whole transaction of his youth. All right, so what is she saying here? Who is the narrator? What is the narrator like? What's going on here?
Seems like Ben is the narrator. She's like just reiterating.
A lot of similarities here, right, between Ben herself and the narrator. For one, we know that Ben went to Suriname and the narrator met this guy in Suriname. She really wants to tell his story. And she says, like, actually, that, like, you know, I'm just telling the truth here. I don't even need to invent anything, because the truth, you know, is so interesting in and of itself. What is her goal in telling this story? I mean, that's gonna be a kind of question throughout, but like, what do you think? What do you think might be the goal of the narrator in telling this story? Mhm. Um, so like, remember Orinoco, or the royal slave, I think she kind of wants to tell us, you know, she keeps calling this guy the hero. And so she's kind of wanting, but he was also a slave. So she's kind of, what does this kind of imply? Maybe that she's kind of using her platform to kind of challenge slavery. Okay, so if you look also at this version, so this is from the Norton Critical Edition. Right around here, she says, my lord, the obligations I have to some of the great men of your nation, blah, 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 blah. This is a true story of a man gallant enough to merit your protection. And had he always been so fortunate, he had not made so inglorious an end. The royal slave I had the honor to know in my travels to the other world, and though I had none above me in that country, yet I wanted power to preserve this great man. If there be anything that seems romantic, I beseech your lordship to consider these countries do in all things so far differ from ours that they produce unconceivable wonders. At least they appear so to us because new and strange. What I have mentioned, I have taken care should be truth. Let the critical reader judge as he pleases. Okay. So what do you think she's doing here?
mean, I think it's kind of just like what you said. She's using a platform to bring attention. She's like using her platform and a very specific story that she knows the public will be interested in to bring attention to a larger issue.
Yes, and to maybe kind of call upon and kind of show not only maybe the kind of horrors of slavery, but also like the problems with colonialism, right? She says like it almost seems here like that she wants this, like whoever she's writing to, this great man, to protect Orinoco, but then we realize that he's not alive anymore. Had he been so fortunate as to have had your protection, he would not have made such an inglorious end. Like basically like you need to use your power to prevent this from happening again. Okay. To prevent people who are naturally, you know, kind of noble and good from being enslaved and being killed in slavery, and also like to respect the new world, right? Okay. She does say constantly throughout the beginning here that like what she's telling is the truth. It's nothing but the truth. She doesn't need to invent or fictionalize it at all. Trust me, it's true. Does this make you suspicious at all? Is it a true
A little
story?
bit. I mean,
Yeah.
it feels like it, like, you know how movies today is like based on a true story, and it's like they took like 3 or 4 aspects from the true story and blew it up to astronomical
Super
proportions.
dramatic. Yeah.
That's what this feels like. It feels like took a lot of word of mouth and capitalized on it.
Yeah. So a lot of authors or scholars rather have written on this. So Anderson's like it's, you know, it's Anderson's novel. So novelty in novels, a look at what's new in Afroben's Orinoco. So like this is actually pretty much, we believe, a fictionalized account. There may have been a slave called Orinoco that actually existed, but we can't really find a whole lot of evidence for that. We do know she went to Suriname, but like it seems like when she was there, a lot of the stuff that she writes about happening later in the story didn't actually happen. So this is kind of really interesting and has kind of baffled critics. Like, why does she say it's the truth if probably it wasn't necessarily the truth? In 1913, this guy exposed borrowings and inaccuracies in Afroben's Orinoco so as to show that Ben could not have been an eyewitness to the events as her first person narrator claimed. He presented this as evidence of personal untruthfulness. Others have accepted the tale as reliable autobiography, but that's not true either. So like we need to kind of look at like how she kind of, like, why is she kind of raising kind of the issue of truth, especially here, if it's not true? Why is she kind of showing this to be truth or claiming it's truth if it's kind of obviously not? You know, yeah, blah, blah, blah. So that again, like there's no documentary evidence that someone named this guy was sent to them. You know, there's not even like, you know, the governors, like they didn't exist. Like, so she seems to have made up a lot of this. Why then does she call it truth? It's a kind of internal question. I'm going to kind of ask you to kind of come back to it once we've kind of read some, like talked more about this text, but like, is it a true story, and how does it challenge kind of readers' ideas of what truth is, and why is it kind of, you know, trying to get us to rethink what truth is? Okay. Is that helpful? I hope that's helpful. I know everyone's super burned out at this point in the semester, but like, this is such a cool story. Stay with me as we read it, because like it's a white woman writing about a Black man from Africa who was enslaved and taken to America. So like, it's like doing some really interesting things. Okay. So she says even before she tells the story of this very admirable man that she first needs to kind of talk a little bit about the New World. So the story, or the novella, kind of begins by talking about the New World. So this is around blah, 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 blah. This is pages around 9 and 10. So She says, before I give you the story of this gallant slave, 'tis fit I tell you the manner of bringing them to these new colonies. The slaves are not natives of the place, but let me tell you a little bit about the natives. So first she's kind of talking about like all the cool animals that are in this kind of place, you know. And then she starts talking about the natives who live in the Americas and how they trade with them. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Will someone read for us? Maybe starting with the beads they weave, and I can make this bigger.
I can.
Awesome, Maddie. Thank you.
Just starting the beads they weave.
Yes.
The beads they weave into aprons about a quarter of an ell long, and of the same breadth, working them very prettily in flowers of several colors of beads, which upon they wear just before them, as Adam and Eve did the fig leaves, the men wearing a long stripe of linen, which they deal with us for. If
Okay.
for these
Pause
beads,
then. Sorry. What does this sentence tell you? Tell me about this sentence.
I think the Adam and Eve reference is really kind of interesting
And
here.
important, right? Yes.
Yeah.
And telling. Yes.
Because like obviously a big part of this is going to be colonization.
Mhm.
Like, we can see it from the get-go, and a big part of colonization
Mhm.
was you know, conversion and like
Interesting. Okay.
turning
Yeah.
everybody Christian.
Mhm. She goes on by saying like this adornment. Do you want to keep going, Maddie, or should someone else read?
I can keep going.
Okay. This
I just
adornment with their
lost
long
my
black
place.
hair. Well, I'm
Right there.
skip a bit. Yeah.
This adornment with their long black hair and the face painted in little specks or flowers here and there makes them a wonderful figure to behold. Some of the beauties, which indeed are finely shaped, as almost all are, and who have pretty features, are very charming and novel, for they have all that is called beauty, except the color, which is a reddish yellow, for after a new oiling, which they often use themselves, they are they are of the color of a new brick, but smooth, soft, and sleek.
What do you think?
It's a little racist.
It's trying not to be, but it is a bit, right? She's like, you know, they're very good looking. Like they have everything in them of beauty, even if they aren't, you know, white, which is what we all consider beautiful, right? Remember, you know, all the way back to kind of Shakespeare and his Dark Lady sonnets. And while he was kind of making a similar argument, right? My lady's eyes, my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun, but she's beautiful anyway, right? You know, their skin is like reddish yellow or brick colored, but like they're good looking anyway. They are extreme modest and bashful, very shy and nice of being touched. And you can see here, like, careful, don't want to be touched. And though they are all thus naked, if one lives forever among them, there is not to be seen an indecent action or glance, and being continually used to see one another so unadorned, so like our first parents before the fall, it seems as if they had no wishes, there being nothing to heighten curiosity. But all you can see, you see at once, and every moment see, and where there is no novelty, there can be no curiosity. So she's saying, yeah, they're naked, but actually that makes them better than us and less sturdy-minded. All right, and let me see, one other kind of, all right, this one. Maybe could someone read this? Someone who hasn't talked yet, and these people represented to me?
I can do it.
Awesome, thanks, Charles.
And these people represented to me an absolute idea of the first state of innocence before man knew how to sin, and 'tis more evident and plain that simple nature is most harmless, inoffensive, and virtuous mistress. 'Tis she alone, if she were permitted, the better instructs of the world, that all the inventions of man, religion would here but destroy the tranquility they possess by ignorance, and laws wouldn't be teach him to no offense of what of now they have no notion.
Good, okay, good. All right, so what is this kind of saying?
I mean, it's like obviously again, religious symbolism and very much so. I'm trying to think of the right word for it. I say glorification. It's much more perverted than that though.
Idealization,
Could be.
fetishization,
Yeah, that's kind of the route I
or where
wanted.
you're going, huh?
Yeah.
All right. So, description of the native people of South America, they seem Edenic. So this is kind of Eden, right? Free of sin and corruption. Have you guys ever heard? So this is kind of where Maddie is going, I think, with the idea of like the fetishization. Have you heard of the idea of the noble savage? Let's look at it. All right, the noble savage is a literary stock character, outsider, wild, human, and other who has not been corrupted by civilization and therefore symbolizes humanity's innate goodness. The problem with the noble savage is it kind of strips Native Americans of having any culture. If they're pre-culture, that means they don't have culture. You know, that if they're Edenic, that means it's before culture. And so you're kind of stripping them of the complexity of being fully realized humans. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. It was a big trope during this time. You can kind of like, it's even here, like John Dryden's play, 1672. Remember, this is from 1688. It's very, 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 very big during this time. And the problem with it, again, is kind of like the romantic primitivism. It's kind of like demonstrates Europeans' inability to see or recognize any culture or civilization other than their own. So what they see here is like lack of culture, and while that's kind of representative of lack of corruption, they do seem to kind of deny Native Americans their fully realized humanity. Okay. So one of the questions I have is like, why does she open the story with this description? What does this tell you about the narrator and about her relationship with people who are other or from different cultures, places, religions, colors, etc.? What do you think?
So it comes off as a lot more tolerant than many in that time period. Obviously, we're like talking about it now as if it's, if I say, yeah, is the word. And
Fetishized.
yeah, though I can't talk right now.
No worries.
And all of that, because we can recognize that that's what that is. But it from that time period, that perspective is obviously
Preferable.
preferable. It's much more
Preferable than
progressive than
those
yeah.
those dirty, rotten savages that need to be erased, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I would like assume that she has at least some sort of decent connection to these other cultures, at least like the decency to think about learning about these other cultures and what they entail.
Open-mindedness, we'll call it, right?
A little bit.
Yeah, attempting to have an open mind, right? Yeah. Open-minded for early modern colonialist nation, right? So it tells us that the narrator is maybe a little bit more open-minded than the kind of gung-ho colonialist kind of thing that we might see, for example, in something like, do you guys know the poem, The White Man's Burden? This is from Rudyard Kipling. It's older, more recent, I should say. It's more recent than Ben's stuff. It's from the height of the British Empire. So let's look at this poem and kind of, it can be helpful to kind of compare Ben's stuff to this. The White Man's Burden. So this is Rudyard Kipling's kind of hymn to imperialism. He says, take up the white man's burden. Send forth the best ye breed. Go send your sons to exile to serve your captives' need. To wait in heavy harness, unfluttered folk and wild, your new caught sullen people is half devil and half child. Okay, so this is kind of how he sees Native people, half devil and half child. Compare that to how Ben is kind of describing them.
I think like another important thing to note is that like after this poem came out and the idea of the white man's burden came out, We literally use that to justify all colonization, slavery, wars, going to other cultures and just stripping them completely bare and taking over them. And we use
And converting
this
them,
phrase,
right?
yeah, and converting them. It's like,
them.
oh, well, it's our duty because they're not as advanced as we are, and so they need to be more advanced. And
They don't
that
have
is,
Christ, and thus they're half devil, right? And they don't know Christ, so they're half child, right? Yeah, yeah. It's our burden to educate them and to kind of take over them, to kind of bring them into Christianity. Sorry, I cut you off, Maddie. Is that kind of what you're saying? So how does this compare to Ben? Not just Maddie. Come on, the rest of you. Maddie's doing all the heavy lifting today. Come on, help me out. Abby, Brett, Crystal, Amber, Victoria. I would think she would maybe a bit agree with the half child. You know, if they're pre-culture, they're kind of innocent and uneducated like children, but not with the half devil bit. And she also is kind of advocating to leave them alone rather than to educate them in Christianity, because religion is just going to bring in more problems. And they are actually much better off without Western religion. So this seems pretty anti-colonialist. Go ahead, Maddie.
can I ask about something that like kind of relates to this, but also kind of doesn't?
Sure.
Anyone else notice how incredibly Eurocentric she paints Orinoco out to be?
Oh yeah.
Like she quite literally says he doesn't look like the other African men.
She
He
doesn't have
all
that
of
broad
these,
flat nose.
yeah, he has all of these Eurocentric features, which is like really, really interesting to me when she's like talking, trying to figure out if it's like a tactic to use to gain him more sympathy with more like with readers of like this mindset,
Yeah,
or if it's her own personal view that that's what a hero should look like.
exactly. Maybe a bit of both. Like it's a really weird, like, both racist and trying and like non-traditionally racist view, right? It's so weird. Yeah, I have a whole slide about that. I can't wait.
It
All right.
feels white saviory.
But the fact is, like, she can't save him, right? Actually, this is the next slide, right? So here, yeah, like, so she can't save him. She is unable to save him from slavery as much as she tries. And so like he's like yeah. All right. So what is the character of Orinoco like physically, as well as psychologically and educationally? Let's look at 12. 12, 12, 12, 12, 12. All right, 11. All right, so here she's beginning to kind of describe Orinoco. He's prince of this country of Coromantien. I'm trying to remember, is that Ghana? I think it might be Ghana. Let me see. Can't remember. Where is Oron? I always put the extra O in the wrong place. West Africa. Yes, we know West Africa, but where?
Central Ghana.
It's Central Ghana. Okay, good. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Thank you, Maddie. All right. So he's the prince. He has no father. He has no mother. He has a grandfather. You know, and he is the only, you know, grandkid left of this guy's line, even though he has tons of wives. Okay. He's a natural general. In fact, he becomes general age 17 because he's just the smartest, best fighter they have, right? He was adorned. Anyone want to read this? Brett, Abby, this is not too much. Brett appeared.
I meant to turn on the unmute. I'll read this one.
Okay. You appeared out of nowhere, out of the void. Okay.
Okay, so
begin with so, and then read to the end of the paragraph.
So that he was adored as the wonder of all the world and the darling of the soldiers. Besides, he was adorned with a native beauty so transcending all those of his gloomy race that he That's a, oh, struck.
As in
Struck.
the past tense of struck.
Oh, all right.
It's
Okay,
weird.
then.
It's a weird old ism. Yeah. That he struck.
And awe and reverence, even in those that knew not his quality, as he did in me, who beheld him with surprise and wonder when afterwards he arrived in our world.
All right. So what is this guy like? He has a native beauty. This is weird. The native beauty, characterizing his beauty as native, transcending that of his gloomy race. So he's like, doesn't look like all the other Black people, more transcendent than that. This is weird. And then here we get that, look, he was educated in the ways of Europeans. Some part of it we may attribute to the care of a French man of wit and learning, who finding it turned to very good account to be sort of royal tutor. Yeah, okay, so he was educated by a French man, and then I have often seen and conversed with this great man. So here she's also talking about Orinoco again. He spoke French, he spoke English, as well as his native language. And here is really weird. The most famous, okay, all right. Can someone read beginning with he was pretty tall? Brett, you want to go again for us?
Yeah, I can go again.
Awesome.
Where are we at?
Right here.
Oh, okay. He was pretty tall, but of a shape the most exact that can be fancied. The most famous statuary could not form the figure of a man more admirably turned from head to foot. His face was not that of brown, rusty black, which most of that nation are, but a perfect ebony or polished jet. His eyes were the most awful that could be seen, very piercing, the white of them being like snow, as were his teeth. His nose was rising and Roman instead of African and flat. His mouth the finest shape that could be seen, far from those great turned lips, which are so natural to the rest of the Negroes. The whole proportion and air of his face was so noble and exactly formed that bating his color, there could be nothing in nature more beautiful, agreeable, and handsome.
All right.
There was. Okay.
What do you think?
I
mean, it goes on, but like, what do you think?
Well, I mean, she's definitely saying she's basically saying he looks like a European person with darker skin, basically.
And not that, gross dark skin that most of them have, but like a true polished ebony or jet. So like, this is like, woo, very strange. Here's someone's interpretation of what Orinoco looks like. Pointy Roman nose, skinny lips, but dark face. Go ahead, Maddie.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if like they're saying that if she's trying to say that he's biracial as well. Like that
I doubt
clearly
it.
seems like that's it. And this is like, because like how that wasn't really, it's like the very beginning of integration, very beginning of slavery and everything. How common was that actually? I'm assuming it wasn't as common.
Now remember, he's like a fictional character. We don't know anything about him. So he's her invention. I doubt it, because like you think he's like the secret son of the Frenchman or something? Yeah, it's possible, but I think he's also like very, very dark, polished jet, right? Could be. I have that like he's basically like he's like the exception that proves the rule, right? So like he's the exceptional Black man who's beautiful that proves the rule that most of the time, according to Afroban and her culture, people of color were not great to look at. So is this pro-Black? Probably not. What might this tell you about the English, even, those enlightened English who are trying to write anti-colonialism tracts and to kind of heroize people of color? I think it's maybe it starts to begin to tell us that like the idea of European superiority is so deeply embedded at this point that that they can't get away from it, even when they're trying, even when they're trying to kind of come up with a Black hero. They can't resist writing a kind of Eurocentric kind of standard of beauty into him, right? Okay, so his culture. So it's obviously a patriarchal culture because his grandfather is the king. And it's one where kind of there's a lot of respect toward elders, right? There are slaves. Orinoco's, country does participate in slavery. So they often kind of enslave the people they battle against. And they do sell them to white people, but the slaves there are treated well. They're given names, they're befriended. I don't know. It's definitely not European kind of slavery. Yeah. Okay, so we get the initial description, both of the country and of Orinoco, and then there's the romance plot. Orinoco falls in love with Imowinda, or at least that's how I say her name. What's the deal here? What's their romance like?
Okay, so sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so they're like together. They like each other. Yeah.
And
They're-
she's the like granddaughter of like the best general who gave his life for Orinoco. So like it seems like a
Yeah.
natural pairing, right?
They're together. And then his grandfather like wants to get jiggy with her, which is really creepy.
Yes.
Like he's in his hundreds, I think it said.
Yeah, right.
It's just weird. It's weird
Patriarchy,
and creepy.
right?
Yeah.
Even though he's got like hundreds of other concubines, right? He's got
And like
lots of
multiple
these.
wives, right?
Yeah. Lots of wives, lots of women. But but like basically, if anyone is offered the veil, which is to be his like, sexual partner, they are forced to take it. To not take it would be a great insult. And so there's all kinds of weird stuff that they're able to kind of talk with their eyes and communicate with their eyes, which I think is so funny. Orinoco switches to monogamy for her, unlike most of the other men of his culture. But the king is jealous and forces her to become a concubine. And Orinoco gets caught between respecting his elders and his culture and the unfairness of his grandfather stealing his beloved and kind of using her and turning her into turning this relationship into a bit of an incestuous one, right? This is the wrong page number, but I really thought that the king took her and like did the deed with her. Did others see that as like...
See, yes and no. Because like at the very end where it's talking about like where they're like in his tent and she's talking to him, she does talk about like stuff happened, but not enough so that I'm not a virgin.
Right.
She's essentially saying like I've still saved myself for you.
I know, right? So like so the king's, she tries to get out of doing all this, and the king says like, look, whoever you love, I'm gonna kill him if you don't submit to me. So she submits, it says, blah blah blah. I can't remember where it says it, but like Orinoco's really kind of I did want to kind of bring your attention to this. Page 19, this is weird AF, okay? Anything that she kind of writes about color and race is weird AF, because it's before codified racism. And so it's weird to see racism take such strange forms. So here she says like, blah, blah, blah. I have observed 'tis a very great error in those who laugh when one says a Negro can change color, for I have seen him as frequently blush and look pale, and that as visibly as ever I saw in the most beautiful white. And 'tis certain that both these changes were evident this day in both the lovers. And so like here she's kind of like battling against this racist idea that only white people can change color, can get pale, can blush, can get embarrassed. Yeah. So this is kind of one example of Afroban kind of resisting the racisms of her time. Right? Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What else am I saying? King takes her. Seems like he rapes her. Then there's this dance and there's a lot of drama. Like she falls over and Orinoco like touches her, and that's like against the rules. And like, well, just the idea is like Orinoco can't quite control himself because of how very much he loves her. His friend Aboen distracts the old woman who's kind of in charge of the Aten, which is kind of like the king's, harem. Aboen woos and seduces and flatters. You notice I have a smirking face there. You know what that means when I say distracts, right? He's a very good wingman, right? They used to call this, I don't know if you guys know the Jersey Shore, but like they used to call this falling on grenade. It's weird to see it in Afro-Ben, but yeah, there you go. Orinoco, okay, so Orinoco's friend Aboen kind of helps out. He's a good wingman. He kind of falls on the grenade of the old woman who like can't get any sexual attention anymore. And in that way, Orinoco is able to sneak into the Aten and he seduces Imawenda and they finally are able to get it on. So this is 24. Blah, blah. The prince softly wakened Imawenda, who was not a little surprised with joy to find him there, and yet she trembled with 1,000 fears. So she's really happy, but she's also like nervous, like, I believe he omitted saying nothing to this young maid that might persuade her to suffer him to seize his own and take the rights of love, and I believe she was not long resisting those arms. Where she so longed to be, and having opportunity, night, and silence, youth, love, and desire had soon prevailed and ravished in a moment what his old grandfather had been endeavoring for so many months. So here, like, the idea is like, he's there in her bedroom, she's trying to put him off, but like she really, really does want to get it on with him. And so like they just can't resist and they have sex. And apparently she had been resisting the grandfather and had not actually had sex for many months. Like, what? Like, what? Like, it really seemed like I was super surprised. I was like, wait, what? Like she was still a virgin? Like, I don't know. Like, whatever. Okay. All right. Anyway, they had missed each other so much and were so wrapped up in having sex that they didn't realize that time was passing. But while they were thus fondly employed, forgetting how time ran on, and that the dawn must conduct him far away from his only happiness, they heard a great noise and unusual voices. And then Orinoco does something so dumb. Like, it's just so frustrating. So he goes and he, goes to his battle axe. And he's naked, and he kind of goes to the door. And he cries out with a commanding voice, "Whoever ye are that have the boldness to attempt to approach this apartment thus rudely, know that I, the Prince Orinoco, will revenge it with certain death of him that first enters. Therefore stand back and know this place is sacred to love, and me this night. Tomorrow 'tis the king's." Like, come on, dude. Like, I think this is supposed to be, well, what do you think? I just get so pissed off. Like, why?
So,
Go ahead.
I don't know if anyone else picked up on this. This is obviously not Ben's intention.
Okay.
I want to start by saying that. But I feel, this is going to sound really weird. I feel as though Orinoco is autistic coded.
He's autistic?
I do. He feels autistic coded.
Huh.
Because a lot of the things that he does, like every time he gets bad news, he literally just lays down on the ground and starts crying. And with this, he's like literally no social inhibitions. And it feels very much so like this is the exact actions. It is like what you see in how autistic people sometimes act when faced with social interaction or heavy emotions.
Huh. It could be, but it also tells us about heroism in this culture, right? Like, does that make sense? Like that like, he can't back down from a potential fight here because of love. But
I kind of read this part as if like they were kind of like as if they were fighting for the woman, and it was more of like his male ego, like he needed to get her and he needed to seduce her more than like anything. It was more like the male like ego trying to like take over.
and this
That's
is why I get a bit frustrated with it, is that is also, Amber, how I read it. Like, he has to, even if has it for himself that he's like finally gotten into bed with Emelinda, the most beautiful woman in the country, he has to make it known to others, right?
yeah, it's like the brag, like, oh, I got it, you didn't, like, oh,
Yep.
I took it from her. It's kind of like the bragging of like the male ego. That's how I read it. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
understand that.
That tends to be also how I kind of read it, as in like, why wouldn't he just sneak out and protect her? Well, because like his ego is more important than she is, and her continued safety is, right? Yeah. People try to break in and see what's up. All this results in the king kind of looking at her now as if she's polluted, because it talks about like the customs, like, so like now she's like now that she's actually had sex with Orinoco, like it turns it to kind of more incestuous, like so as it is the greatest crime in nature amongst them to touch a woman after having been possessed by a son, a father, or brother. So now he looked on Imawinda as a polluted thing, wholly unfit for his embrace. Nor would he resign her to his grandson because she had received the royal vow. He therefore removes her from the Aten, and they both are sold off as slaves to another country. And so here we get a taste of kind of Ben showing how toxic patriarchy is, right? And maybe kind of indicting Orinoco as well. Yeah. Okay. I gotta hurry up. I think I'm pretty much good. I mean, those are kind of the big things that happens. Orinoco, like he doesn't get told that she's sold into slavery, he gets told that she died. And so like, and then as Maddie said, he falls over and cries and refuses to lead the army until the exact last minute when he pops up and like suddenly heroically saves the day, right? So he still like feels bound to kind of help his country and his grandfather by fighting their battles, but it also kind of shows his humanity because he makes friends with potential enemies even if and when he enslaves them, right? And then around page 30, the English show up. How are the English characterized? And what is the difference between Orinoco and his people and the English? So this is around page 30. What do you think? Oops, whoa, I am way too far. So here's where he defeats the army, but also then becomes like friends with the other commander. Okay. Orinoco. There arrived in port an English ship. This person had often been in these countries and was very well known to Orinoco, with whom he had trafficked for slaves, and had used to do the same with his predecessors. Here is again kind of indication that Orinoco's country participates in the slave trade. Blah blah blah. Took more delight in white nations. So basically, what happens is like so the prince goes onto the ship, and they serve him wine and everyone gets drunk and has a good time. And then the captain gave the word and seized on all his guests. They clapping great iron suddenly on the prince, and they put him in the hold and they locked him down, secured him, and the same treachery was used to all the rest, and all in one instant in several places of the ship were lashed fast in irons and betrayed to slavery. That great design over, they set all hands to work to hoist the sail, And with as treacherous and fair a wind they made from the shore, with this innocent glorious prize, who thought of nothing less than such an entertainment. Some have commended this act as brave in the captain, but I will spare my senses of it and leave it to my reader to judge as he pleases. So they struggle, or sorry, I just read struggle somehow, struggled for liberty, but basically they lied to Orinoco to get him to come onto the ship and then captured him and sold him into slavery, right? And Ben's narrator basically says this is cowardly and treacherous, and the English are horrible. Like, you know, Orinoco's grandfather is pretty shitty, but like the white people here are worse. So we now have kind of depictions of three different cultures. We have the Native Americans of Suriname, we have Orinoco's kind of country in Ghana, and finally we have the white people, specifically the English. And of the three, the white colonizers are the least sympathetic. Okay. All right. So I was going to have you kind of compare and contrast Ben's portrayal of Suriname in South America. Well, basically, I want you to kind of compare and contrast Orinoco with some of the other stuff we've read. And I think a good way to kind of start is by thinking about Cavendish's Blazing World, right? So how is Ben's portrayal of Suriname and South America and, you know, the noble savages there kind of interestingly similar to or different from Cavendish's Blazing World? What's different? Do they seem mostly similar or mostly different to you? What do they show about early modern women writers in particular, and about power, colonialism, and race? I'm going to give you kind of 5 minutes to work on 22.1 using some of the stuff we've talked about in class. Okay, hopefully you were able to kind of get some good stuff up. You can always kind of use this as kind of a jumping off point for your final paper. If you wanted to compare Cavendish and Orinoco, next class we're going to think about Orinoco and maybe similarity to or difference from portrayals of Erin, Othello especially, and maybe even a little bit, you know, Caliban. Yes, that's the one. Okay. Now I'm going to kind of, I think we should kind of look at the second discussion question. So discussion question 2. So this one asks, consider Edward Said's notion of Orientalism. I have a short video for that. What kinds of Orientalism do you see in Orinoco, and in what ways does maybe this text challenge Orientalism? In what ways do you think, like, be specific, in what ways do you think this text is progressive for its time, and in what ways does it perpetuate Western-centric privilege and racisms? Okay. All right. Blah, 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 Orientalism here. I'm gonna. All right.
Welcome to the MCAT Multimedia Series,
I'm
a MCAT analysis of Edward Said's
Sorry,
Orientalism.
it's on double speed.
Edward Said was one of the most important cultural figures of the late 20th century. In his 1978 book, Orientalism, Said made the influential argument that scholarly writing from America and Europe presented inaccurate, misleading, and stereotyped cultural representations of the East. He argued that the Orient is the stage on which the whole East is confined. Said believed these biased perceptions hindered a true understanding of Middle Eastern and East Asian culture. To understand Said's theory, let's imagine a scholarly university professor writing an academic report on the party scene. For research purposes, he decides to go to a party. When he arrives, the party is in full swing. Most guests are casually dressed and dancing to loud electronic dance music. Others are sitting around lounging on the floor, kissing and laughing. The whole situation is alien to the professor. He has his own set of values and finds it difficult to understand or appreciate the behavior of the partygoers. He can't identify himself with them or understand what made them who they are. In the same way, Said argued, when Western scholars studied Eastern culture, they couldn't understand it because it differed from their own. So they portrayed the East as exotic, enigmatic, and curious, judging and romanticizing it without ever understanding it. Deep down, the professor feels his values are justified. After all, he is an academic. His distaste for the partygoer's lifestyle confirms to him that his perspective is correct. He publishes his report, portraying the partygoers as raucous, sensual, uncultured, and unintelligent, because they deviated from his own personal values. Just as the professor saw himself as superior to the partygoers, Said believed the West thought its society was superior to Eastern society. But Said went further. He thought Western scholarship held strong ties to the domineering imperialist societies that produced it, concluding that much Western scholarship was inherently political and intellectually dubious. Said argued that stereotyping became a justification for the Western colonization of Eastern countries. The West painted a picture of an Eastern world that needed civilizing. Invasion was framed as salvation, rescuing the inhabitants who were too lazy and too pleasure-focused to be fit to govern themselves. Said deduced that either the West is blinded by its own failings and doesn't recognize it as stereotyping, or it believes its own culture is superior. Edward Said's book became the foundational text for post-colonial studies and transformed Middle Eastern studies. His theory still remains critically relevant today, so much so that it has become part of our language. The term Orientalism describes a patronizing Western attitude towards other cultures. A more detailed examination can be found in the MCAT analysis.
Okay. So in what ways do you think that Afroben's text is and is not kind of participating in a kind of Orientalist project? So even though when Said was writing, Orientalism was more toward like Middle and East Asia, recently it's kind of been expanded to include Africa and native cultures and other places as well. Okay. All right. All right, so that gives you a comparison to do, and it also gives you kind of a potential theory in which to kind of analyze Orinoco. So finish those before next class when we finish Orinoco, and Brett will lead us in a discussion. Happy Tuesday.
Bye. See you Friday.
See ya.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you.
You too. Bye.